Harem. Just this word, like a magic carpet, transports us to the world of Eastern tales, full of mysteries, luxury, and misconceptions. Images instantly appear before our eyes, odalisques, in translucent silks adorned with jewels, lazily fanning, themselves with peacock feather fans, and the all-powerful ruler surrounded by a multitude of beautiful women like houris. Romantic? Undoubtedly. Enchanting? Certainly. Truthful? Only partially, like the reflection of the moon in rippling water, beautiful, but distorted. What if I told you that the real harem was far more complex, multifaceted, and interesting than all Hollywood movies, pulp novels, and even the boldest fantasies? What lay behind the golden grills, guarded by vigilant eunuchs? It concealed not only the notorious Eastern passion, but also intricate political struggles, subtle, almost imperceptible diplomacy, brilliant education, by the standards of that time, and genuine, sometimes absolute, female power. Today, we will not just lift the veil of mystery, we will throw it wide open and delve into the daily life of the harem to discover what it was truly like. Finally, debunk the established myths and perhaps view this fascinating and complex world in a completely new light. Let's start, as is customary, with the most important and perhaps the most widespread misconception, which has taken root in the public consciousness, like a weed. The harem is not at all a synonym for the words brothel, not a house of tolerance, not a place where the sole purpose was to satisfy the sultan's carnal desires. Yes, intimate relations between the ruler and his concubines certainly took place, but this was just one, and by no means the most significant aspect of a complex social institution, a true state within a state with its own laws, traditions, and hierarchy. First and foremost, the harem is the ruler's family, his clan, his support, and his headache. This is the place where his mother, the Sultan's Valide, resided. Legal wives, if there were any, as this was not always the case. Sisters, daughters, nieces, and, of course, numerous concubines. But why would the Sultan, Padishah, Emir, no matter how he is titled, need this? Such a vast number of women, sometimes numbering in the hundreds, or even thousands. The answer lies in the very structure of Eastern empires, in their political and social framework. The dynasty is the cornerstone of power, the foundation of foundations, the guarantee of stability and prosperity, or at least, that was the belief. The more sons a ruler has, the more secure his throne, and the less likely it is that rivals, relatives, or ambitious nobles will seize the throne. The more stable the state, and the more peacefully the ruler himself sleeps. Therefore, the birth of heirs, healthy and numerous, was one of the primary, if not the main, tasks of the harem. An interesting fact: contrary to popular belief, sultans did not always spend most of their time in the company of their favorite concubines. There were favorites, of course, but it was not always these women who captured the ruler's heart that became the mothers of the heirs to the throne. Political considerations, dynastic interests, the advice of the Valide Sultan, all of this played a much greater role than fleeting passion. There was even a special ceremony called the Halvet Night, which the Sultan spent with a concubine. It was not just an act of love, but a whole ritual, surrounded by many rules and traditions. Imagine a huge palace, a real city within a city, a whole labyrinth of rooms, corridors, courtyards, and gardens where hundreds and sometimes thousands of women live, belonging to different cultures, speaking different languages, having different characters and ambitions. How to organize their daily life? How to maintain order? How to prevent quarrels, conflicts, intrigues? The answer is simple, though not obvious. With the help of strict rules, a complex multi-tiered hierarchy, and an unwritten code of conduct that was passed down from generation to generation and absorbed with mother's milk. At the top of this pyramid of power, like a majestic, impregnable mountain, stood the Siu Valide Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan. She was not just the mistress of the harem, she was its uncrowned queen, and often the grey cardinal of the entire empire, the behind-the-scenes ruler, whose power sometimes exceeded that of the sultan himself. The Valide Sultan wielded enormous power, controlled vast resources, influenced appointments to state positions, corresponded with foreign rulers, and sometimes directly governed the state, especially if the sultan was young, inexperienced, in poor health, or simply not interested in the affairs of governance. Below her were the Kadin Effendi, the sultan's wives. If there were any, not all sultans took official wives, preferring to limit themselves to concubines. Next were the Iqbal, the sultan's favorites, women, to whom he paid special attention, gifted with presents, and distinguished from the general group. And finally, the numerous Jariye, the concubines, each of whom dreamed of climbing this complex hierarchical ladder, attracting the sultan's attention, bearing him a son, and ideally becoming the new Valide Sultan. And contrary to popular belief, perpetuated in books and films, entering the harem for many girls was not a curse, not a tragedy, but an incredible stroke of luck, a true social elevator, a ticket to a completely different life. Why? Because the harem was not only a home, not just a place where the sultan's women lived, but without exaggeration, an elite school, a true university for women, where they received an education that was unavailable to most women at the time, even those from noble families. Girls were most often gifted to the sultan as a sign of special favor, like a valuable gift. Or they were captured during military campaigns as a trophy, and were taught literally everything: the fine arts, music, playing various instruments, singing, dancing, poetry, calligraphy, foreign languages, the Arabic language of the Quran, the Persian language of poetry and literature, and sometimes even European languages if political circumstances required it. Literature, history, geography, theology, the basics of mathematics and astronomy. Imagine there were entire libraries in harems filled with handwritten books, invaluable scrolls. The most capable, talented, and ambitious girls could make a dizzying career, becoming not just concubines, but influential figures at court, advisors to the sultan, managers of his property, administrators of large charitable funds. And this is not just about the notorious bedroom diplomacy, the ability to charm the sultan with beauty and the skill to please him. No, this is about real power, real influence on the politics, economy, and culture of the empire. The harem was a true political center, a hidden arena from prying eyes where serious battles unfolded, sometimes more fierce than on the battlefields. Here, the most complex intrigues were woven, secret alliances were formed, destinies were shattered, and individuals were elevated to the pinnacle of power. New favorites. The mothers of the sultan's sons engaged in an unending, ruthless struggle for influence, for the future of their children, and thus for the future of the empire. They used all available means, from bribing eunuchs and officials, spreading rumors and slander, organizing conspiracies, to direct pressure on the sultan, blackmail, and even murder. And the marriages of the sultan's daughters to high-ranking nobles, foreign rulers, and influential sheikhs were crucial tools of external and internal policy, a way to consolidate power, to form coalitions, ensure the loyalty of the elites, and prevent rebellions. For example, the marriage of the sultan's daughter to the Grand Vizier, the head of the government, made the vizier practically a member of the sultan's family, his relative, and significantly strengthened his position. But at the same time, it made him more dependent on the will of the sultan and the Valide Sultan. There were entire dynasties of grand viziers who passed their position down through inheritance, thanks to marriages with the sultan's daughters. But how was order maintained in this vast, complexly organized female realm? Who ensured the rules were followed? Who prevented quarrels and conflicts? Who ensured the safety of the inhabitants of the harem and the sultan himself? This crucial, vital function was performed by eunuchs, castrated men who served as the guardians of the harem and the only intermediaries between the secluded female world and the outside. There were two main categories of eunuchs, differing in origin, duties, and status. The black eunuchs known as Kızlar Ağası, usually of African origin, most often from Sudan and Ethiopia, they were responsible for guarding the concubines, maintaining internal order in the harem, and overseeing the observance of rules and traditions. The head of the black eunuchs, the Kızlar Ağası, was often one of the most influential people in the empire, wielding enormous power, having access to the sultan at any time of day or night, and could even intervene in state affairs, influence appointments, and provide advice to the sultan and the Valide Sultan. The white eunuchs, the Kapı Ağası, were typically of European origin, most often from the Balkans or the Caucasus, and served in the palace. However, they operated outside the harem and carried out various tasks related to the management of the harem, but did not require direct contact with the women. They were responsible for receiving visitors, delivering letters and gifts, organizing the sultan's outings and his entourage, and procuring food and luxury items. The eunuchs were not just servants, they were part of the system, part of the mechanism that ensured the functioning of the harem and the entire empire. Everyday life in the harem, contrary to popular beliefs spread by numerous novels and films, was not a series of endless festivities, entertainments, and amorous pleasures. Yes, there were musical evenings, theatrical performances, lavish feasts, and ceremonial events. But most of the time, the women spent studying, as we have already mentioned. Education was very important, including handicrafts, embroidery, weaving, knitting, reading, prayers, and of course, meticulous self-care. Bathhouses, hammams, were not just places for washing, but also a kind of club, a center of social life in the harem, where women could interact with each other. They could share news, gossip, discuss the latest events, and make plans. Cosmetic procedures, massages, selecting outfits, jewelry, fragrances, everything. This took an enormous amount of time and effort. It was a whole art that required knowledge, taste, and experience. The harem was a kind of state within a state, with its own laws of fashion and beauty, with its own trends and standards. Women competed with each other in the sophistication of their outfits, originality, hairstyles, and skill in using cosmetics and fragrances. But what do we know about life in the harem from first-hand accounts, from the inside, so to speak? After all, most of the information that has reached us are descriptions by European travelers, diplomats, merchants, who generally only saw the external side, the ceremonial facade of the harem, and even then not always accurately, often embellishing or distorting what they saw. Fortunately, letters, diaries, and memoirs of the harem's own inhabitants, women who spent most of their lives there, have been preserved. And these testimonies, these living voices from the past, often refute established stereotypes and debunk myths, painting a more complex, multifaceted, and sometimes quite unexpected picture of life behind the gilded bars. These women, seemingly deprived of freedom, choice, and the ability to control their own destiny, found ways to express themselves. They fought for their rights, even within the confines of existing rules. They built careers, influenced the politics, economy, and culture of the empire. They left their mark on history. Thus, the harem was not just a place where the Sultan's concubines were kept for his pleasure, not just a golden cage for beautiful captives. It was a highly complex social institution, a microcosm that reflected all the diversity, all the contradictions, all the grandeur, and all the vices of the Eastern world. It was a world where beauty coexisted with intrigue, luxury, with strict hierarchy, female submission, with incredible willpower and a thirst for power, apparent lack of freedom, with the opportunity to receive an excellent education and make a dazzling career. A world that still captivates the imagination and inspires artists and writers, directors, and makes us repeatedly wonder what truly lay hidden behind the walls of the harem, behind those impregnable, rock-like walls guarded by loyal eunuchs. Thank you for spending this time with us, delving into the mysteries and enigmas of the harem, this astonishing and contradictory world. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, this dive into history, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. There are many more interesting, unexpected, and exciting stories ahead. Until we meet again, until new discoveries.